Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in internet shitlords. Lighting my pipe right now. You'll have to excuse me. Things are a little bit chaotic here. We just had a very brief power outage. Those aren't super common, you know, I mean, I think maybe they were more common in the past. But, you know, Uruguay's had electricity for, I'm guessing, at least 30 years now. So I think that they're getting a handle on it. No, I kid Uruguay. Uruguay's had electricity for a really long time. It's got, you know, I probably have a higher speed internet than a lot of the people watching this in North America. You know, it's a really good information hub and everything, you know. We just sometimes still have power outages. It happens. But, yeah, so I've had to, like, get myself, after having to try to deal with all the lights are out, I've had to get back into the groove of doing this video. Hasn't affected, you'll be happy to know, it hasn't affected Big Chungus too much. Whoa! Chungus was, I'm not expecting to be on camera just there. So there we go. She wasn't pleased. I'm sorry, Chungus. Sorry, say hello? No, she doesn't feel like saying hello to the people today. Oh well. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about something that might seem like a rehash in a way, because I'm sure I've done other videos where I've mentioned this sort of thing before. But I think maybe I haven't done a good enough job explaining it. Or at least I still keep getting into fights on the internet about it, especially on Twitter. So there are some people, specifically new school gamers, who absolutely do not get this. Like, they just cannot, they can't seem to grasp it. Which is what I'm talking about when I talk about, you know, immersing into a character. And also what I'm talking about, kind of the characteristics of myth, right? You have, you know, younger people are largely not raised with the same mythical constructs that everybody else had been raised since forever. Like, I watched this movie the other day from, like, the end of the 60s, basically. And in the movie, someone's talking to, you know, there are a couple of dirty hippie teenagers, right? And they're talking about something, and somebody makes a reference to Samson. And everybody immediately knows who Samson is. You know, because everybody in the Western world knew who Samson was. They knew the story of Samson. You know, that was part of the common culture. And that was part of the common cultural mythos, right? That you know the story of Samson and Delilah, super strong guy, right? His hair, all that story. They wouldn't have to explain any of it. But I think there's a lot of people today, a lot of people under 25, who have never heard that story. Obviously, if you grew up in a actually religious household, you would have. That's maybe where this particular example is not great. But even if you grew up in a religious household, you might not, you know, you might not have really clear about some of the other, you know, the non-religious part of the mythic stories, right? Like, how many people of that age group are likely to really know who Odysseus was, you know, or Achilles, or Jason, you know, or maybe even Sir Gawain, you know, to say nothing of like I don't know, Sir Palomides or something like that, you know. So there's this, like, lost set of context about myth. Ironically, I think that the religious kids would still be the most likely to know those, even if it's evil, heathen sources, because a lot of Christian homeschoolers have a curriculum that involves classical education, whereas public schools have no such thing whatsoever, right? But anyways, the thing is that this lack of understanding of myth is part of why people can't understand the idea of non-human characters, right, and non-human creatures in an RPG, because they don't see it as a context of myth. They see an RPG world as a world where everything is just culture, not myth, because they can't comprehend the concept of myth. So there are like some really basic things, like basically like metaphors, they can't understand an allegory, for example. They can't understand that a creature or a type of monster is meant to represent something. This is something that is fundamental in almost all cultures. Certainly was fundamental in the West for a very, very long time. And I don't just mean like in terms of monsters or something like that. I mean in terms of like just about everything, right? There was a time when a Western person would know about, if somebody talked about a bird or a flower or an animal, they would immediately connect this into this web of symbolism in their minds of the, Western symbolic world with certain traits. Now, some of that still survives, right? So like when you say an owl, you still think maybe of wisdom. I don't know. I do. People my age do. I don't know if kids even get that one anymore. But yes, that's still something that survives from that. But there used to be a much broader catalog of all that. Like there's the language of flowers, right? Every flower was meant to represent a certain thing, like a secret communication. So you gave certain type of flowers for certain reasons, and people knew what those were. In the 19th century and the 18th century, they knew that language, and it was used to communicate. So it's very sad that all of that has vanished. But not just sad, it's dangerous, because it means people can't understand. They see everything in our society from this self-centered lens. And, fundamentally, first of all, a human-centered universe. But fundamentally within that universe, they're the center of the universe. Because that's all what all inevitably follows. People decided to stop living with the land and living on the land, to quote Yellowstone, right? So this is why, if you try to explain to them how their characters, their non-human characters, are basically just humans in cosplay, they're like, no, like they can't grasp this, right? I had this argument on Twitter with someone where they were trying to insist that the idea that non-human monsters should have alignments was offensive, right? And so this was an answer to you watch my recent video about how now Wizards has decided that even mind flayers and beholders shouldn't be described as evil, right? They're just misunderstood, I guess, right? They used to be called aberrations. I don't know if they're going to change that now, but it meant, something abominable, right? Because that's what they are, right? And they're an affront against God and nature, and that's a concept that isn't a bad concept. That's a very important concept, because if you take away this idea of aberration, then you create a world where nothing can be condemned, right? Like if you literally can't condemn a tentacled monster that sucks out people's brains, or an enslaving giant eyeball that wants to hate everything that is not itself, these symbols of like, the reptile mind danger and of the extreme of avarice, right? Or the extreme of narcissism, then you start condoning these things by definition. If you say they're not, we can't call them bad, well, then you're saying they're acceptable and good, and that's really dangerous. But in terms of gaming, it also creates another problem, which is that if your characters are just humans in drag, basically in non-human drag, then you lose all of the ability to make that character interesting. Now, I know I've done this talk about that particular subject before, but it seems to me I'm not being able to get through to certain people about it. I guess there's some people that just wouldn't want to go about it, and maybe you guys can work out here a bit what how do we explain this to these people? How do you explain it to someone who has no concept of the notion of allegory, of what allegory is meant to be? Right? Because the way they see it is just you saying you can't play non-humans, or you have to play non-humans only as one thing that we allow, or something like that. That's not the point. The point is a non-human, if it's going to be played, should be played as an alien entity, right? An elf is not just a person from Seattle with pointy ears, right? Which is what D&D has now made it into. Now, this can depend on your campaign, right? Because you've got, in a game like Lion and Dragon, or the Invisible College, or the Old School Companion, it makes a lot of sense for you to play in that world, a world where you can only play a human, right? Because in the context of the traditional medieval world, non-human creatures were all different degrees of dangerous, hostile, and they all acted in a way that was like crazy. Now you could play in the world of Last Sun. Not only can you, but everybody does who's played it, play non-humans, right? Like there's literally, not in that book, but in some of the RPG Button presents those, there's guides to playing like talking animals that are literally animals that can talk, right? All kinds of non-humans of all varieties, robots, mutants, right? You can play. There's a random weird humanoid generator, right? And you can perfectly play any of those as player characters in World of the Last Sun. But why? Because World of the Last Sun is a somewhat satirical gonzo setting. There are allegories in it, but part of the thing that makes it stupid is that not just elves and dwarves, but like all other races in the setting, even like animals, anything with an intelligence, even a toaster if it's smart, are basically act just like people, right? And that makes it dumb. Right, that's one of the things that dumbs down a setting. Right? It can be done for hilarious results. It can be very entertaining, but basically, there's no difference between playing, say, a Cyclops mutant or something like that, and a pure-blooded human, except that the pure-blooded human in World of the Last Sun can be a cleric, and nobody else can. So even there, I've made a little distinction, but fundamentally, elves are just like either hipsters or snobs or autists or something like that. Dwarves are mentally traumatized nutcases that want to go on lost crusades. Halflings are like savage, feral, extremely violent children. So I guess what our children will all be like in a few years from now, I guess. And and then all the other races can be all kinds of other things, but they're all basically human, right? Like they act like humans. But that's a very, very different thing than playing in a setting where what you want to do is evoke something grander, right? Where you want to evoke an epic sense of myth. But the important point, the thing I want to emphasize here is that there's only that two-sided choice. There's nothing in between, right? Either your non-humans are creatures of myth and allegory that should not act like regular human beings, whose way of thinking and way of behaving should be archetypal, and therefore seem either anything in the range from erratic to incomprehensible from the perspective of a normal human person, or your non-humans are just actually people doing cosplay with pointy ears, right? And then there's nothing special about them. There's no point to have them. This has a lot of repercussions, right? Like it means that in Dungeons and Dragons, if non-humans have special abilities, but really they're just humans, then why would anyone play a human, right? And in fact, that's what's happening with the new crowd in 5th edition, where you've got all of these Tumblerina people making these blue-skinned water genasi, half dryad, whatever. This is just nonsense that they invent as, picking race and physical form the same way that they choose their gender and their sexuality, right? Like it's just a ridiculous. It's all fashion, right? It's all kind of this fashion statement of what your character is, but fundamentally your character is just a human, because you're playing them with human motivations and human thoughts and human sentiments. So on the other hand, in something like the Invisible College, right, there are angels and demons and gods, all these archetypal forces, where literally in magic, you're a magician, you are summoning or invoking or evoking these archetypal forces, right? And when you do that, you interact with them, but you realize, like, one of the ways a DM can really create that sense of this is a trippy out there experience is that these forces only act in the context of what they represent, right? In the context of their metaphor, in the context of their allegory. And when you do that, it creates an alienness to it that makes the human characters all the more human, Now, it's your choice, and it depends on what kind of a campaign you want, right? Like, I literally created a game world where people just cosplay, non-humans are just humans in cosplay, right? And that's fun. It can be fine, right? It can be funny. It can be entertaining. But if you want to do it in something mythic and epic, you have to do it the other way around. Humans have to be humans, and everything else has to be mythic archetype. And the dumb thing is, don't go around pretending that by acting a little bit quirky or something like that, you're playing an elf and not a human, just a human in drag who is acting up, right? The whole deal of this, that the part that bugs me is that a lot of the people that push to do this are doing it more than anything to just try to have a feeling of specialness for themselves, or to stand out against other people. And they think they're being, they think this is making them unique, and it's not. If you're, you're playing a blue-skinned, half-demon, half-elemental warlock in 5th edition who is also asexual and is non-binary. Wow, congratulations. That's you and 2,000 other losers. Like, what is special about that? There's nothing special about it. You want to play a character in 5th edition that will actually make you stand out from the crowd? Play a dwarf with a MAGA hat. Then we'll see. Then we'll see how much you stand out, So it's just dumb. The most rebellious thing that you could do, or the most unique thing that you could do if you're a 5th edition player, and if you want to ignore everything else I've just said until now, listen to this 5th edition player, right? As if any of you have still kept playing this far into the video. But if you, by some miracle you have, right, the most unique thing you can do as a player character is to play an ordinary human and make him not be just like you. He's not a parody, or not a parody. He's not a port of you into the world, right? He's not just clearly you in your ideal sense or something like that, but somebody totally different than you, but still totally human. And then try to act until he becomes real. And if you can do that, you will have the best character in the game, because undoubtedly all of your friends are going to be playing, trisexual fire-genasi half-tieflings, and they'll be boring as hell. So try to remember this, 5th edition gamer that is hypothetically watching my video. As for everybody else who's watching my video, post this everywhere where a 5th edition gamer might see it and might try to actually get the point, and let's see if we can't get them to understand that thing that they were never taught, and therefore has this huge gap in their entire humanity that they don't realize. They don't know how broken they are. They don't see that the fact that they were never given any of this as children has made them less functional human beings, right? It's made them semi-functional, at best, human beings. But there's a way out from that, right? So there's no time limit from when you can start to work at discovering the idea of myth, and from that the idea of virtue, and from that the idea of pursuing actual truth, and not being drowned in your own narcissism, So good luck. I hope it works out. But share this video anywhere you think people will find it interesting, or anywhere you think people will be pissed off by it. And if you want to support me, well, check out all of my products. You can send me money on Patreon. I have a Patreon page, but I never use it for anything. It's there so that if you've bought all my other stuff and still want to help supporting me, and God bless you if you do, then just you can get on there. You can toss me a few bucks every month. But if you haven't bought all my products yet, be sure to check them out. Stuff like the Old School Companion. The Old School Companion 2 is coming really soon. The Invisible College, Lion and Dragon. These are all bestsellers. The World of the Last Sun has just hit Electrum bestseller now. And also my RPG Pundit Presents series. There's 106 issues of RPG Pundit Presents, adventures, setting material, a guide to playing talking animals in World of the Last Sun, a guide to creating random weirdo humanoids, adventures, and all kinds of other stuff, right? So any of those things, you're getting something that you can use in the game. The two things that make me different from a lot of the stuff being put out there now is, first, I don't despise gamers, and second, my products are meant to be used. They're not meant to be there for either virtue signaling or as some kind of lifestyle brand decoration. So buy them to use them. And I guess that's everything today. Share the video, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. We're already like halfway up the step to 5,000 subscribers. So that's kind of impressive. We're getting there. Subscribe, like button, all that stuff, and we'll check you out. I don't know if this won't be my last video of the year. If it is, then Happy New Year's to everyone. Currently smoking. If not, well, we'll see. Currently smoking Lorenzetti Half Volcano plus Argento Natural.